If you've been recording and trying to produce your own vocals, you've probably already learned about EQ and compression and setting up vocal chains for yourself. But there are a lot of different things that go into a vocal production that make it sound less like a demo and more like a final finished track. So in this video, I'm going to share a few techniques, and you should walk away with some new things that you can implement into your workflow and make things feel a little bit more polished and a little bit more like a final vocal production. Let's fucking go. So the first thing I want to talk about is how to keep a verse interesting. We're going to use reverb throws, delay, and some background vocal counter melody in order to do that. I've got this song pulled up by an artist named Sabs. So I'll just play through the first verse with no effects that I've added, aside from the main vocal chain.
I'm not your therapist. I've told you that. I'm not insensitive, but it makes me mad. And that you only call when you're down inside the deep end, talking drunk and blue. Yeah, I know you're unemployed, there are jobs for that.
So if you're anything like me, you probably got bored around halfway through that. As soon as I feel like I'm getting bored, it means that we have to add something. A good rule of thumb is like every 8 bars, you need to add something new that's going to keep your listener's attention. So the most simple thing that you can do is use delay throws,
It makes me mad.
which is just copy pasting your lead track, taking the section that you want, throwing it on that track, and adding your favorite delay. Super simple. Just play around with the level of it, and you get something like this.
But it makes me mad. It makes me mad. And that you.
But then the next thing that happened was the back half of that verse was pretty empty. So we did some background vocals on it. And a rule of thumb here is 3 stacks for each part that you have. 1 for the center, 1 for the left, 1 for the right. And they start out pretty standard. Rhythmically, they're kind of lining directly up with the lead.
Only call when you're down inside the deep end.
But they start to veer off a little bit on the word blue.
Talking drunk and blue.
And that's what we had at first, but I still felt like it was missing something. So we came up with this little thing. And I threw an EQ on it, filtered out all of the lows and highs, boosted that kind of 1K-ish range just to give it a little bite, and a Valhalla reverb just to give it a room. And so now all together, we've got this part that's going to keep things a little bit more interesting in the space that the lead's not filling up.
Only call when you're down inside the deep end, talking drunk and blue. Yeah, I know you're running.
And so then that brings to the last decision, and that's to help us transition out of the verse into the pre-chorus. And we could do this by finding like a splice loop that's like a cheesy reverse symbol or something. But I like to do this with reverb throws and automate the wet mix on my reverb in order to kind of open up the space and help blend into the next section a little bit better and easy. And it's an extremely easy thing that you can do. You just add a reverb on there, set it to touch mode. And so then while it's playing, you can record your automation going.
Yeah, I know you're unemployed, there are jobs for that.
Super rough, but this is what it sounds like.
Yeah, I know you're unemployed, there are jobs for that.
And so all together,
I'm not your therapist. I've told you that. I'm not insensitive, but it makes me mad. It makes me mad. And that you only call when you're down inside the deep end, talking drunk and blue. Yeah, I know you're unemployed, there are jobs for that.
pretty cool. So the next thing we can do to keep things interesting is a little bit more complicated, and it has to do with sidechaining. If you're not familiar with what sidechaining is, more or less, you're taking a copy of your signal, which in this case, let it be our lead vocal and what I'm about to show you, and you're sending it to a plugin and telling it, hey, only turn on while the lead vocal is playing. Let me show you what I mean.
I was younger just yesterday, chasing birds down the cul-de-sac. Now my complexion is...
If you listen closely, there's almost like this spring reverby 60s, 70s guitar echo going on in the background, which is just her lead vocal running through a delay. But I was talking about sidechain. With this delay by itself, without the sidechaining, which I'll get to in a second, it was too overpowering.
I was younger just yesterday, chasing birds down the cul-de-sac.
It was just too much. Like, it was, what do I focus on? I'm not sure. So I really wanted to carve out space here. So what I did was I threw on a ducking plugin by FabFilter. It's actually a noise gate at first, which is basically a trap door for sound. Like, if something is this loud, let it through. If it's this quiet, shut the door. So it kind of lets you get rid of a bunch of unwanted things. But the FabFilter one actually has a ducking thing that works kind of like a very intense compressor. And so what I did, I told this plugin, hey, while the lead is playing, duck the delay down. And if you see, I've got this sidechain set up. If you don't know how to set up sidechain, like, look it up real quick. It's very simple. Like I mentioned briefly before, you basically copy a signal. Most plugins have like a sidechain button that you hit, and so you're basically directing your output to the plugin. It sounds more complicated than it is. Maybe it doesn't sound complicated. But anyway, I'm basically taking my lead signal and I'm sending it to this Pro G, a noise gate by default, but I set it to a ducking setting. And so I'm basically telling it, hey, while the lead is playing, engage and suffocate this delay. So now we get this sort of pumping effect. So you should be able to hear it kind of getting cut off a little bit. And that's directly from the transients of the lead kind of smashing it down. And so after I did that, just playing around with the mix of it, we get a lot more subtle thing going on in the background.
I was younger just yesterday, chasing birds down the cul-de-sac. Now my complexion is rusted gray, like the tar in the pavement.
So now it's just kind of filling up the spaces subtly in between these lyrics that are supposed to still feel very intimate. And I don't think this is stepping on the lead anymore, but it's still giving us some more information to pay attention to. There are a lot of different things that you can use sidechaining for. You can sidechain to compressors, EQs, distortion effects, and I like to send my lead vocal to all different types of things using this sort of concept of engaging an effect only while the lead is playing. So you can get some really subtle, you can carve out a lot of new space using this idea. The last thing I want to talk about is sampling your own vocals. Instead of having to dig through Splice and find something that you might hear in everybody else's track, you should use yourself whenever it's possible. A big problem all the time of mine is finding the right melodic parts when I'm digging through samples. And sometimes it's just easier to sing your own part and affect the shit out of it and make it sound super weird. So in this song, this is a song of mine, I've got this vocal sample. Here's what it is dry. Pretty basic, but there's a pretty basic effects chain that I use on vocal samples like this. Slap some tune on, pitch monster, which is basically like alter boy. It's a formant shifter. Red light distortion is a stock Studio One plugin, but you could use really any distortion that's going to add some fizziness and bite to it. Valhalla Verb is all over the place. Binaural pan for width, you could use a doubler. Pro Q3, just carving out some random shit that I don't remember. And a delay. Now it sounds kind of like this. Pitch it up 3 semitones because we were not in the right key. So all together,
You get outside my head, 'cause I can't understand this. Anyway, go on, make yourself casual. I've already lost my rest.
so now I have a cool thing that I made myself that is going to be unique just to my sound. But that's not the most interesting way to do vocal samples, because that sample right there was like intentionally just for that part. But there's another part in the song that was a little bit more of a random surprise, I guess you would say. I've got this thing here. Ugh. Let's throw some effects on it. EQ, cut the lows, cut the highs, just feel it out. A compressor to pick up some peaks. Valhalla reverb on everything. A multiband compressor that I use on a lot of different vocals to control things that I want to be a little bit more dynamic. Our compressor sidechained to the lead vocal, so it's squishing this part while the lead vocal is playing, so it never overpowers it. LFO tool for like a pulsating effect, and just another random EQ to clean things up. And it sounds like this now. But I took this a step further. I took this vocal and I was like, hey, I need this to be even more weird. A little bit of context. I've got this synth part that I made. It's kind of like Flume inspired. I was like, okay, what if I use that vocal sample to kind of mirror that a little bit? It's affected the same way as the one before it. It's just chopped up and rearranged a little bit and pitch shifted in order to blend with that synth part a little bit. That's not the last thing that I did. I wanted a counter melody on top of it as well. So all together, I'm going to play this whole section leading into there. Pretty cool. That's kind of like all the concepts put together, basically, that I talked about. So to recap things a little bit, we used reverb throws, delay throws, background melody counterpoint to keep a verse kind of evolving and interesting. We learned about sidechaining our lead vocal to different effects so we could get a more subtle thing going on in the background and never distract away from the lead vocal. And we talked about making samples of our own vocals so we don't have to dig through Splice and find things that are more unique and authentic to our sound. And we chopped the hell out of those and threw them into stuff in some interesting ways. So yeah, I hope that you learned something. If you struggle with any of this stuff, I help indie artists by doing this stuff for them. So feel free to reach out in any way that you feel like. There's links around this video, or there's the comment section. I'd love to hear from you.